Have you ever found yourself overwhelmed by anger, only to say something you deeply regretted later? Have you ever felt swept away by sadness, as if your emotions were controlling you rather than you controlling them? Have you ever noticed how your happiness depends on things outside yourself, people's approval, achievements, or possessions, making you feel helpless when those things change? Maybe deep down you've believed that strong emotions are just part of who you are, that being emotional is your nature and there's nothing you can do to change it. But what if I told you that all of this is an illusion, that true power has never been in surrendering to your emotions but in mastering them? Schopenhauer, one of history's most insightful philosophers, saw something that few have the courage to admit. Those who are slaves to their emotions are slaves to the world. The world teaches us that expressing every feeling is healthy, that emotional reactions are authentic, that we should let it all out, as if every emotion deserves a stage. But Schopenhauer proposes something different, a more balanced, more powerful, and infinitely more liberating path. He believed that emotional control is not just suppression of feelings, but an overwhelming form of freedom. Emotional mastery doesn't diminish life, it enhances every experience by putting you back in the driver's seat. This video is for you who constantly feels at the mercy of your emotions, swinging between extreme highs and crushing lows. For you who reacts too quickly, too strongly, and later wishes you had stayed calm. For you who is tired of feeling controlled by your own feelings, watching as they dictate your actions, your decisions, and your happiness. Perhaps you have confused emotional expression with emotional freedom, but today I will show you that emotional control can be your most powerful weapon, and that true liberation doesn't come from expressing every feeling, but from choosing which feelings deserve your attention. Get ready to see emotions in a new light, not as commands you must obey, but as suggestions you can evaluate. Let's dive into Schopenhauer's ideas and discover how to master your emotions without suppressing your humanity. Why do we feel such a need to react to every emotion, to express every feeling, to let our inner states dictate our actions? Because deep down we have been conditioned to believe that our emotions are who we are, that resisting them is denying our true selves, that emotional expression equals emotional health. But Schopenhauer saw this as a symptom of our deepest weakness, the inability to distinguish between experiencing an emotion and becoming that emotion. And behind this weakness lies the unexamined mind, a mind that doesn't question why it feels what it feels, that confuses emotional reactions with truth, and that turns every feeling into a necessity for action. Schopenhauer said that most people do not seek peace when they follow their emotions, they seek temporary relief. They chase emotional expression not because it leads to lasting happiness but because they can't bear the tension of restraint. Emotional reaction in this sense is not a tool of wisdom, it is a release valve, a desperate attempt by the untrained mind to ease inner pressure. And what does this mean? That when you feel compelled to act on your anger, to indulge your sadness, to chase every pleasure, you have already entered the cycle of emotional dependence and lost your freedom. Because the simple need to express every emotion shows that you are still trapped in the belief that emotions should control actions. Schopenhauer called this living by the will, the behavior of those who live under the tyranny of their desires, impulses, and emotions, who want to feel good at any cost. But this quest for emotional relief is exactly what keeps you trapped. True strength, Schopenhauer said, lies not in expressing emotions but in understanding them. It is in feeling the full force of anger while choosing not to act on it. It is in experiencing desire without becoming its servant. It is in living with disappointment without being defined by it. What he proposes to us is a type of power that is not measured in emotional outbursts but in emotional understanding, a power that comes from the ability to remain steady while storms rage within you, a power that grows when you stop reacting and start observing. If you really want to be free, you need to understand this. The game of emotions is a trap, and the first to surrender to their feelings has already lost. Schopenhauer knew that the reactive mind is a subjugated mind. The observing mind, that is the powerful one because it stands above the need to act on every feeling. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Schopenhauer did not write for the emotionally dependent. He wrote for the few who have the courage to look at their feelings, understand their origins, and transcend their control. For him, the average person lives trapped by emotional reactions, mood swings, and the constant pursuit of pleasure. But there exists another type of being, rare, powerful, free, what he called the sage or the genius, one who has mastered the art of emotional intelligence. The sage does not live by reacting to emotions, he shapes his emotional experience through understanding. And the most impressive part? He often does this with complete inner calm while others are still caught in emotional storms. The sage doesn't need to eliminate emotions, he doesn't engage in their destructive games. He observes them, understands them, and carefully chooses which deserve action and which are merely passing weather. Because he has understood something that others ignore. Emotions are not commands, they are information. The emotional mastery of the sage is not empty, it is rich with insight. It is self-awareness, it is inner authority, it is the sound of mind over matter. While others are controlled by their feelings, he commands respect with his steadiness. While others are tossed about by emotional waves, he observes and reveals strength merely through his calm. This emotional control is not rigidity. It is not coldness. It is absolute ownership of one's inner world. The sage knows that every emotional reaction is a potential chain, every impulsive action based on feeling is an opportunity to lose freedom. That is why he remains measured, not because he feels less but because he understands more. He has transcended the need to be driven by every emotion. His feelings serve him, he does not serve them. And more than that, his emotional control disturbs others because it forces them to confront their own lack of mastery, to deal with their own emotional chaos. In a society of emotional reactivity, those who master their feelings become inspirations. Schopenhauer saw the sage as one who creates his own inner weather, his own emotional climate. He does not depend on external validation for happiness, and that is why he is admired, because nothing impresses more than an individual who cannot be manipulated by their own feelings. But this raises an essential question. What makes emotional control so powerful? Why do so many people struggle to master their feelings? What happens within the human mind when the expected emotional reaction is replaced by thoughtful consideration? The answer lies in psychology, and that is exactly what we will explore next. Because to understand the power of emotional control, we first need to understand the chaos generated by emotional reactivity, and believe me, it is much deeper than it seems. Emotional control is not just the management of feelings, it is a mirror of self-knowledge, and what it reflects for many is uncomfortable. When you choose not to react emotionally, you are not just controlling yourself, you are forcing yourself to see your emotions for what they truly are, temporary states, not permanent truths. And that realization destabilizes because most people do not feel emotions to understand themselves. They feel emotions to reinforce their existing beliefs, to protect themselves, to avoid the emptiness that exists between what they feel and who they truly are. Then when you remain emotionally controlled, their own lack of mastery becomes apparent. Psychology has shown that in emotional situations, calm is perceived as strength. It doesn't matter if you're just maintaining perspective, the emotional person begins to feel exposed, reactive. Why? Because without matching their emotional level, without joining their reactivity, they lose the comfort of shared justification. The human brain goes on alert. The amygdala, the region of fear and quick reactions, activates. The emotional person starts to project their own lack of control onto you. Why isn't he as upset as I am? Am I overreacting? Is my emotion inappropriate? And in this psychological dynamic, emotional control acts as an invisible barrier. It protects where no one sees but everyone feels. Schopenhauer sensed this long before modern psychology confirmed it. For him, the average person lives as a slave to their emotions. They act on impulse, react out of habit, speak out of temporary feelings. The superior spirit, the one who masters themselves, remains measured because they know that every emotional outburst is energy handed to circumstance, every reactive moment is an opportunity lost. Moreover, emotional control has a powerful effect on relationships. People who thrive on emotional drama depend on your reactions to maintain the cycle. When you do not react emotionally, you break the pattern and the dramatic person feels a loss of power. They need your emotional response to validate their own position. Without it, they lose their influence, they reveal their dependency on emotional exchange, they show the weakness they have tried so hard to hide. But there is something even deeper. Emotional control also highlights others' lack of inner work. It activates their insecurities about self-regulation, self-awareness, emotional intelligence. Because suddenly the other person realizes they are not in control of themselves, that their emotions are driving them, not the other way around. And this is uncomfortable for the ego that believes emotional expression equals authenticity. This is why emotional mastery requires strength. It is challenging not just for others but for you as well because it goes against the social current, against the impulse to react, to express every feeling, to let emotions dictate actions. But it is precisely for this reason that it is powerful, because it demands self-knowledge, and self-knowledge is true power. Now that you understand how emotional control operates in your mind and affects others, how it builds inner security, breaks down reactive patterns, and creates true freedom, it is time to go further. To stop being just an observer of your emotions and become someone who directs them intentionally, strategically. In the next part, you will discover exactly how to transform emotional understanding into a conscious practice, how to master your feelings without suppressing them, and when you learn to do this, no emotion will be able to control you anymore. The time has come to stop merely understanding emotional control and start practicing it. Because knowledge without application is just theory. From now on, you will learn to transform your emotional awareness into a practical skill, no longer as just a concept but as a daily practice ready to liberate you from emotional slavery at the exact moments you need it most. The first step is simple yet powerful. Pause when your emotions scream for reaction. This requires strength because everything in you will want to act immediately, to express what you're feeling, to seek relief through expression. But that impulse is the trap. Every time you give in to it, you reinforce the belief that emotions must control actions, that feelings must determine behavior. True emotional mastery is born only when you create space between feeling and action, when you understand that having an emotion doesn't mean you must act on it. The second tool of emotional control is observation. While your feelings rise and fall, trying to dictate your behavior and fill your mind with urgency, you observe. But you don't observe as someone waiting for the emotion to pass so you can get back to normal. You observe like a scientist studies a natural phenomenon, with curiosity rather than judgment. You perceive the physical sensations in your body, the thoughts that accompany the emotion, the urges disguised as necessities. And you store all this information because when you understand your emotional patterns, you gain the power to choose your responses rather than having them chosen for you. The third tool, perspective. Learn to see emotions as weather, not climate. Just as clouds pass through the sky without becoming the sky itself, emotions move through you without becoming you. This shift in perspective creates freedom because while you cannot always control what emotions arise, you absolutely can control how much authority you give them. A simple reminder that this feeling will pass can have more impact than hours spent trying to change the emotion itself. The fourth tool, redirection. When you master emotions, you learn that feelings are energy and energy can be channeled. Rather than suppressing emotions, which doesn't work, or blindly expressing them, which can cause harm, you redirect their energy toward constructive purposes. Anger becomes motivation, fear becomes preparation, desire becomes creativity. You transform the raw energy of emotion into fuel for chosen actions rather than letting it dictate random reactions. But be careful, do not confuse emotional control with emotional denial. Schopenhauer was never an advocate of suppression. The mastery we're talking about here is fully feeling your emotions while choosing your actions. You are not withholding, you are processing, understanding, directing. Your emotions are still experienced completely, you just don't hand them the keys to your behavior. And when the right moment comes, the moment when emotional understanding has already given you clarity, you can act with intention. Not because you were driven by feeling, but because you chose your response from wisdom rather than reaction. But this brings us to an even more delicate issue. Because up to this point we have talked about how to use emotional control to gain freedom, but there are moments when emotional expression is not just about freedom, it's about authenticity. There are situations where people are not just managing their emotions, they are suppressing their very nature, denying their needs, disconnecting from themselves. And you, without realizing it, may be giving away your emotional health in the name of control. This misunderstanding of emotional mastery is happening every day, and that's where the most dangerous point of this journey comes in, when emotional control is no longer liberation but a silent prison for someone who has lost touch with their genuine feelings. In the next part, we will expose this truth, show how you may be misunderstanding emotional control, because while you think you are practicing mastery, you may actually be building walls that separate you from your authentic self. And Schopenhauer already knew this danger. Is there anything more harmful than emotional chaos? It is emotional suppression disguised as control. Is there anything more deceiving than thinking that feeling nothing is the same as mastering everything? That numbing your emotions, disconnecting from your feelings, avoiding emotional experiences is synonymous with wisdom? That being emotionally flat is a sign of strength? But what if I told you that this could be the greatest trap of all? That many times what passes for emotional mastery is actually emotional avoidance? Schopenhauer saw this with brutal clarity. What you call control is often just your disconnected surrender. Have you noticed how you might pride yourself on not getting angry, not feeling hurt, not showing disappointment, but deep inside these unfelt emotions are poisoning your well-being? You convince yourself that it's mature not to feel, that it's stronger to remain detached, that it's wiser to avoid emotional investment. But the truth is one, you are paying a very high price for this false control, and the worst part? You are being harmed by a misunderstanding of what true emotional mastery means. Schopenhauer spoke of the intellect overshadowing the will, not eliminating it. His philosophy was never about not feeling, it was about not being controlled by what you feel. It is the difference between steering a powerful horse and killing it. One is mastery, the other is avoidance. When you accept this type of emotional suppression, the kind that disconnects you from your humanity, you are surrendering your wholeness without realizing it. You are being shaped by fear of your own feelings, by discomfort with emotional truth. You are no longer whole, you are just what remains after emotion has been cut away. And this is the opposite of what Schopenhauer called the examined life, because the true examined life is not to feel less, it is to understand more. It is to regain connection with your full emotional experience while maintaining choice over your actions. It is to feel deeply, not because emotions control you, but because you are secure enough to allow their full experience without losing your center. This emotional suppression needs to die, and in its place the emotional integration must be born, the one that doesn't fear feelings, that doesn't reject human experience, that doesn't apologize for having depths and heights of emotion. The one that stands amidst the full range of human feeling and, without denying any part of it, maintains the power of choice. This is the emotional mastery that Schopenhauer would respect, the mastery of the individual who has become the conductor of their own emotional orchestra, not someone who has silenced the musicians. But how to reach this level? How to move from being controlled by emotions or disconnected from them to being the master of your full emotional experience? How to find the balance between feeling everything and choosing thoughtfully? The answer lies in the most powerful figure of Schopenhauer's philosophy, the sage with clear vision. We have already talked about this figure, now it is time to understand how to become one. In the next and final chapter, you will discover what it takes to embody this new type of human being, because the world doesn't need more emotional reactors or emotional zombies, it needs those who master the full range of human feeling without being mastered by it. We have reached the final point, and now I need you to understand one thing with perfect clarity. Emotional mastery is not absence. It is not emptiness. It is not a space without feeling. True emotional mastery is full presence with your feelings while maintaining your power of choice. It is wisdom. It is the sign that you are no longer controlled by your emotions, you are understanding them with your full attention. Schopenhauer never wrote for those who are content to live reactively. He wrote for those who want to transcend, for those who are willing to look at the emotional patterns that society normalized, even if facing them hurts. The emotional mastery of the sage is not the emotional deadness of the disconnected, nor the emotional slavery of the reactive. It is the balanced awareness of the warrior who has already won the inner battle before any outer challenge begins. It is the strength of one who no longer needs to run from feelings or be consumed by them, because he knows they are just part of his experience, not the whole of his identity. Now look at your life. How many times have you reacted out of emotional impulse, only to regret it later? How many times have you suppressed what you truly felt out of fear or social pressure? How many times have you let your emotions decide your actions, speak for you, create chaos where clarity could have prevailed? Enough, Schopenhauer would say. Living this way is a disservice to your potential. Accepting either emotional reactivity or emotional suppression is betraying your capacity for true mastery. From today on, your relationship with emotions needs to change its nature. It needs to stop being either surrender or avoidance, and become conscious experience, a recognition of feelings without being defined by them, an affirmation of your full humanity even as you maintain your power of choice. Because who you are is not your emotions, but how you relate to them reveals everything about your freedom. And that requires courage. Do you have that courage? Then comment below, I choose emotional mastery that brings freedom, not control. Not just so I know you made it this far, but so you can publicly affirm this choice, this commitment to yourself. Because words have power, especially when they speak about a new relationship with emotions. And don't stop here. The next video is essential. It will expand what you learned here and take your emotional intelligence even further. Watch it not for me but because you deserve to go beyond. And remember, the reactive are controlled by emotions, the avoidant are afraid of emotions, but the wise understand their emotions and remain free.